Hello. I am super excited. I know I've been talking this one up. I am super excited to introduce you all to Erin Huizenga. Erin and I met almost 20 years ago. It's been a
Yes.
while. It's been a hot minute. As people, young professionals in the design field, and both of our journeys have kind of gone apart from one another, but also kind of parallel in a strange sense we learned recently. So I'm super excited to have her here today. She is the founder and CEO of Desklight, and she's doing some amazing work with her team in the learning space. I'm going to kick it over to you, Erin, to let you really introduce yourself to our listeners today before we jump into the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Jess. And it's wonderful to be here with you and spend the next few minutes together. I'm Erin Huizenga, as you said, and I founded Desklight about 10 years ago now, which is pretty unbelievable. And yeah, we have a team of just awesome learning designers, learning experience people, and we love to work with learning leaders in organizations and corporations who are really looking to lead with learning in a different way as a benefit, and centering on what learners really need and want while making organizations better and stronger through that effort. So that's me. And as Jess said, we have a lot of similarities in our career paths and backgrounds and things. And I've always been on the consulting side. And before starting Desklight, I had worked in different agencies, design firms over the years, like IDEO, Gravity Tank, Gensler, lots of Chicago-based places, and brought all of that intensity and love for consulting and consumer-facing work to the world of learning. So I always say, I want learning experiences to be as great as any consumer experience. I think that's so important, and honoring people's growth and desires for their best future self.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I want you to talk a little more about Desklight in what is the work you are doing. You did that at a high level, but why is it important and why is it so needed today?
Yeah, we are doing learning experience design work with folks like the Smithsonian and McGraw-Hill and other education publishers turned education product companies. Lots of professional associations who are really looking to lead with learning in a different kind of way as a membership benefit. Some higher ed universities, K-12 and early learning through foundations. So we believe the work is so important to kind of connect the dots between all of those typically segmented learning experience moments in someone's life, because nowadays more than ever, the lines can and should be blurred in terms of, thinking about lifelong learning and what's best for each individual human person as they kind of navigate all this stuff going through their life, from really truly early learning opportunities with whomever they are with each day, from parent to at-home caregiver to facility, child care facility, all the way through to where they are professionally in their work and how much do they love that work, what do they really want to do next, or do they want to stay and just get really grounded in that work, and what do they need in terms of skill development to get there and maintain their ability in those positions. So we love to cross-pollinate between all of those things, and that's why the diversity of our customer and partner list is quite vast. And we feel like it's just so great to be able to partner with people that are excited and curious about how to do learning better. And so many learning experiences are punitive, especially in the adult learning space, and things that, if we're all honest, people don't really want to do. They just feel like they have to do, or just kind of check the box to get that certification. And we want people to feel like this is something they look forward to and can see themselves in, and can do something differently in 5 minutes or tomorrow based on what they learn. And I think that more and more these days, the same is true for K-12 and higher ed also, like making those experiences so much more meaningful and applicable day in and day out, which is really going to help that learning stick. So that's another big thing we talk about around not just stage on the stage or lecture-based learning, but how do we make this stuff actually memorable? That's the job that we do every day. And that's something that we bring as a specialty to things people know how to do or know how to talk about, but they don't have that understanding of instructional design and design theory and best practices, or learning theory and best practices. So we can bring that fidelity to partner with people that are great subject matter experts in order to help them get what they know into the hearts and minds of other people.
That's awesome. And it is so needed. Like the whole sphere of learning and education is ripe for change, right? What would you, or how would you describe what the system currently looks like? Like in terms of, you're trying to create these learning experiences that are meaningful and engaging, and that people walk away actually not only remembering it, but implementing it, right? So what is that trying to replace? Like, what currently does that look like?
Yeah, I'll start with, adults and kind of backtrack from there. I think with adult learning, there's this concept called, not to get too in the weeds and geeked out on it, but there's this concept called andragogy, or adult learning principles, versus pedagogy. And many people think pedagogy is just the thing for everybody, right? But andragogy means adult learning, teaching adults, grown-ups that have a lot of life experience, and they want their learning to be meaningful and actionable in that moment. And so, yeah, for adults, especially in training scenarios, or even like professional development or continuing education, when people choose to go back to school, they want their learning to feel like it's based in and respected by what they've already done. And so often that's just not the case. And that's why learning feels rather punitive and meaningless in some ways, or just something they have to do. And so, people typically, if they haven't really thought about learning in this way as joyful and as a benefit, they often think about learning as something that, gosh, I just have to do that to get that promotion, or to be able to participate in some group, or just really getting something on their resume in a different kind of way. And that's fine, but we feel like there's a different way to think about it. And I think about it again as like consumer experiences. Like, instead of going on a retreat or going on that next vacation, like try a learning sabbatical by yourself. And oftentimes people feel like they have to vacation from their vacation, if we're all really honest. And so a learning sabbatical is something that you can do to reflect and fill yourself up and come back feeling better than you did before you left your, daily rhythms, whatever that looks like, work, home, play, etc. So just kind of reframing how we think about learning as adults. And then, we all know how higher ed is changing these days, and I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about that. We could get into it if you want, Jess. But I think learners after their senior year of high school, they want to either immerse themselves in a really meaningful group, in a community, and continue to learn about things that they share passion for with other people in their circles that they might meet. So kind of going back to the original intention of what higher institutions were really meant to be, to immerse in learning and curiosity, and not really know what they want to do necessarily yet. So I feel like there's some change that needs to happen, just in terms of how we as caregivers, whether we're parents or not, of our young people, are pushing them into these skills-based pathways, or into a great college or university that we think as adults they should go into. But those students, those learners, might not necessarily know or care about those things. So how can we, replace some of those immediate places that we're pushing them into with these opportunities for some bottom-up learning? Like, how can they find their curiosity and just kind of scratch that itch and play around a little bit and try some stuff on, and not be feeling like it's the end of the world if they don't, get an A on that test, or pass an exam that will get them into that next level of, pathway. So I think we put that pressure on our young adults really early in a way that's not fruitful for them. And then backing up from there, K-12, I do feel like we missed the boat a bit with the pandemic. There were some things that I think could have shifted, certainly not overarching innovation, but incremental things that we could have done to potentially support teachers better that are teaching in public schools and independent schools. And I think there's some additional ways that we could think about, again, getting our learners to a place of curiosity a little bit earlier, and just giving them opportunities to be teaching assistants when they're in middle school, right? And just some of these novel ideas where they can give back to people that are younger than them and learn how to facilitate, learn how to lead more organically. So that's just one of many examples of that kind of thing that I think we can incrementally kind of shift and rethink.
Yeah. I mean, my kids were in Montessori for a while. I know we talked about this the other day, but one of the biggest takeaways I had from that whole experience is the reminder that we learn best through teaching. And so the older kids teaching the younger kids, I always think it's amazing, and it's so vital to retaining and engaging with the material and the knowledge that you're given, that we're missing in a lot of our school situations. But
Absolutely. I think another thing too, not to go on and on about Montessori, but I love that you brought that up, because another thing that's incremental and something that we could all try with public school settings is just work planning, like giving students a moment at the beginning of every week with the teacher or mentor or facilitator to plan out their week and decide what they are going to, tackle on each day. And as the teacher, as the leader, and as the school, really, that the students are reaching for those competencies and meeting those objectives, but they have choice throughout the week on if they want to do their math on Tuesday or their Spanish on Tuesday. It's up to them. And that's just such a beautiful thing that Montessori has baked into their system that I think could be, try worthy for other scenarios.
And so empowering, right? It says you have agency over your own learning and your own curiosity. And okay, so to summarize, what I heard was the education system right now, a lot of it is based on the idea of checking the box or getting to the next phase of the journey, right? Getting the certificate or getting the promotion, or if you step back, getting the degree, right? Getting out of first grade and into second grade when you go really, really young, right? It's all check the box progression. And you and your team at Desklight see a lot of potential for engagement beyond that, where there is ownership and agency around what you learn and how you learn it. Is that?
Absolutely. I think that's a great summary. Yes, absolutely. And how each of those groups of learners can support each other too throughout life, like how, senior learners, senior people that are older can come back in and support young learners, and how we can sort of stir the pot up from these typical sort of linear approaches that we have to, pushing people through.
Okay. All right. So, that was really fun to start with, just on the work that you and your team are doing and why. But now we're going to jump on our time machines. We're going to go into the future. We're going to go about 25 years out, look at 2050, and imagine what learning can be in a world where we are flourishing and we're doing it right and we're engaged and we're curious. So tell me what that world can look like.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, 2050, right? Like, I love that we're all envisioning, what that can look like in terms of the futurism of how it can all look. Yeah, gosh, so many thoughts on this. Yeah, I know. Jess and I, we were comparing notes before the recording here, and a few days ago, she inspired me to kind of write out some thoughts in terms of a manifesto, and just think about, how do we ground in all of this, and where's the connective tissue between all these phases. But yeah, just sort of briefly, and Jess, we can dive back in, to certain places and things. But I think with early learners, we have an opportunity to, start them wherever they are around, community schools, home schools, with parents, and help them to, not through technology, but to, kind of work in these generational cohorts, like we were just saying, around, having, whether it's the parents or the grandparents or, community members that are passionate about, giving back to the children, to come together and really facilitate their own curiosities and areas of, interest really early on. And I think we don't give our kids that much credit, as we could and should, even though they are seemingly so young and in some people's minds immature. They haven't seen the world yet. They don't know. But if we just stop long enough to really listen to what the kids are saying and what they're curious about, they do have those interests. And it's some really good leads from them on, how could we help them shape their own, experiences in classrooms or in any kind of like learning, when they're that young. And so, I think in that there's opportunities for self-assessment and reflection, even when they're really young. And then, as they get a little bit older, I think, kind of thinking about, of course, all of the AI and the technology that's going to be all around us and almost hard to kind of like separate ourselves from, by the time it's 2050. And, just giving them access to some of these basic, AI literacy and computational thinking skills and things when they're young, because, many of these decisions will be made by these technologies, that were previously made by humans. So, back to the Montessori, there's a lot of people that say don't, and Waldorf and some of these, philosophies, don't give them too much access to technology too early, yet, giving them some of this language so they kind of know how to navigate our world, because our world will be just such a blurred line of technology and humanity and what that can all mean. So that's kind of my vision for, early learning at that point. And then, getting into the teen and younger years, giving them access to, global citizenship, sustainability, understanding, letting them, again, kind of control their own learning objectives and what they kind of are most interested in, letting them lead their own path. And, mastering competencies, like higher level competencies versus focusing on traditional testing. So many schools around the globe are already experimenting with this, and some doing it very successfully around, it's like the work planning we were just talking about, giving teachers a list of, okay, as long as a student graduates from third grade knowing and mastering these competencies, then you can get them to a place of knowing that stuff and mastering it in any way you see fit. So it's a really cool way for teachers to feel like they're empowered to teach in a way that they're comfortable and that they feel like they can bring their best selves to. And it gets outside of traditional testing, because, for many students, I think increasingly so, testing and traditional grades don't really have too much to do with their lived out experience, especially as some of these expectations on graduating from high school with the GPA and getting into a greater school and things like that. I think some of that pressure around Ivy Leagues will potentially always be there and be there in 2050. However, I think there's a lot of folks kind of rethinking what that can and should look like in terms of actually mastering and understanding these concepts. I think EI, EQ, resilience, interpersonal, creative problem solving, a lot of the things that we talk about, are going to be even more important in the midst of AI, as we kind of figure out where AI stops and starts. Apple, not to date the podcast, but Apple Intelligence launched in the last couple of days, and my 14-year-old is pretty excited about what that means. And Apple's doing an interesting job kind of positioning their authority and entry into the market on that. So, that's a little bit on teens and younger years. And then I think adult learners, a lot to say here, but, to go with what we said earlier, just giving people permission to be honest about where they are and what they want to do. And, I think it's fair to say that in most organizations or corporations, people don't feel like they can be 100% honest about how long they plan to be there, what this job or role kind of does for them, and where they're thinking their career goes. Some people might not know, but some people might really know, and they don't feel like they can be completely honest about the fact that it's a stepping stone, or they want to really like dig in and become, all they can be, whether it means like trajectory into management and senior leadership, or it's like, I just want to be a really good designer here and I want to stay here forever and continue to do my thing. So just honesty around who they are as a person, what their goals are. And then I really envision by 2050, we have like chief learning officers, people in leadership that are really focused on people's wellness, of course, but also learning goals. So I think that's a blurred line around like work and life balance, what they want out of life. How can we give them those opportunities to learn while at work about these things? And I think like the Google Genius Hour, that Google does this Genius Hour where they give people time to sort of explore their own curiosities. I think that's a manifestation of what we're talking about here. Yeah, and smaller achievements through micro credentialing and badging, things like that. Those can sort of ladder up into something that people can carry with them from job to job. And to me, it doesn't really matter too much around who's giving those credentials, but it's a matter of, can that person storytell around why they chose these things and what they're interested in. And Jess and I, we talked about this before too, just around coming from a place of always having a portfolio and building a portfolio. I hope that for all learners by 2050, they have a portable set of credentials and portfolio and story that they take with them, and they can talk about what they've learned, where they're going, what they want. I get real excited about that. And then finally, just the idea of like healthcare for seniors, people that are over 65, that are retired or maybe not quite ready to retire yet, but they're headed in that direction. Like, how can we encourage them to, as we were saying, kind of fold back into the learning adventure journeys of people younger than them, whether it's mentorship that's a little bit more systemic and clear, or early learning, K-12, that's inviting people from the community back in. And really kind of healthcare. I know this is happening already a little bit, but healthcare refocusing not just on physical care, but on mental fortitude for the sake of this ecosystem of learning as we're talking about it. So I'll stop there, but yeah, lots of thoughts on that question. Yes.
I love it. It's so exciting because I've always seen that learning is a journey. Like, learning isn't supposed to be you start at age 5 and you stop at 18, right?
Right.
Or 21, 22 if you go on to school. Because there is a population of people that won't go on to school, and we still have to meet them, right? We have to meet them where they are and with what they want out of life. But what you're describing here is, it's a lifelong journey that we want to look at and see more as part of our story, right? It's the story of our growth. That's where the portfolio comes in. That's where the micro credentialing comes in. And it's not tied to necessarily one company or one industry. It's tied to the story of who we want to be. Yeah. And we get to spend our early years being super curious and trying to figure out who we want to be, and not what we want to be, but who we want to be.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. My dream is for people to be able to talk about what they're learning, what they're listening to, what they're talking about, the way we talk about vacations and consumer experiences and products we're buying. Because I think oftentimes, to your point, people aren't sure they should or can talk about what they're learning because it feels embarrassing, or like they're showing that they don't know everything about a particular topic. But if we can give ourselves and our communities and our culture permission to not know everything and ask better questions and express, like, these are the things I'm curious about and interested in learning more about, and these are the things I'm investing in right now, I think it makes for a much more interesting, holistic cultural experience and discussion if we don't pretend like we know everything and we really let our hair down and talk about, gosh, Jess, I'm really glad to know that you're learning about this thing in this audiobook. I also want to listen to that audiobook now, for example, so I think it just leads to a richer human experience.
Well, and the science backs that up. I mean, the science of positive psychology, right? So I have the 8 pillars of happiness that I talk through a lot, but one of them, which is always my favorite, I claim that you're not supposed to have favorites as kids. The pillar that I am most in tune with, and it's the easiest for me to do, is curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that always wanting to understand more. I know I am the first one to say I do not have all the answers, right? But I am completely confident, which is another pillar. I am confident in my ability to learn what I need to know on my journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we build learning systems around that, then that gets us one step closer to flourishing for everyone, because that's what science says we need. Science says we need the interconnectedness. That's the intergenerational, the giving back. We need the curiosity. We need to constantly be growing and becoming who we are, right? It's unpeeling the layers of the onion. Yeah, no, I love this stuff. I love education, and I love people who are doing really good work in trying to make it as best as it can be for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have this vision. What is our roadmap to get from today to that vision?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do we get there?
How do we get there?
Yeah, great question. I think the traditional silos, as we've talked about, kind of sprinkled throughout our conversation so far, those silos need to really just kind of go away, wear away the way we think about them in our idealistic thinking, right? Like how do we just let ourselves go from the expectation that you have to go through K-12. Arguably, you do have to graduate from high school because of a lot of things about how culture and our world works. Do you have to go to traditional higher ed? Maybe, maybe not. Do you have to go to that job in order to do XYZ when you're not sure? Probably not. So just letting yourself kind of really explore, especially earlier, if there's young listeners listening to us talk about this. Like I tell my 14-year-old son, you don't necessarily have to go to a traditional college or university experience. Our job as parents is to help you figure out what you're going to do with your life and how you're going to make an impact in the world. But letting go of those traditional silos and those traditional expectations, I think is something about, how do we get there? We can hold hands around, some of that thinking. I think it's learners living out their own learning portfolios, and they feel empowered to make those learning choices outside of those traditional systems. Learners and systems value projects and global experiences more than they have before. I think we'll continue to see that more and more. We see a lot of field trip programs, programs that are nonprofits typically that go in and work with public school kids across the country or across the globe to give them access to those experiences, big and small. So I think this is how we get there, to kind of break down some of those expectations and give people more experiences outside of the classroom. Higher education allowing for portable credentials. That's a big one. A lot of people are talking about these right now. I know the Lego Foundation is exploring some of these things, Walton Foundation. Just how do we work with the systems in place to allow for shared understanding, shared learner responsibility, portability, and then the systems underneath all of those expectations to actually make it happen, and the willingness, of course, to. Very provocative to say out loud, but I do feel that some additional middle market schools in higher education will continue to either disband and really go away, or be acquired by other organizations, universities, colleges that have better value propositions. So I'm seeing middle market schools really leaning into certain departments or degrees, so that students from a recruiting perspective really know what they're buying, what they're getting when they pay those tuition dollars or take out those student loans in order to go to that school. For better or for worse, I think we're headed into more of that consumer mentality with how we see, especially middle market schools. And if you think about it, community colleges and Ivy Leagues are already sort of playing that game. So I see that for sure around, middle market schools kind of performing better or changing substantially because there's more affordable for and nonprofit options out there for learners. Um, let's see. Yeah, places of work seeing learning as a benefit for their employees. This is what we think about at Desklight every day, and this is what gets us out of bed every morning to really think about learning as that benefit and giving people permission to think about learning differently.
Mm. Yes, and I think that's the first piece. That's the over encompassing theme, right? We have to give ourselves permission
Yes.
to think about learning differently, and we have to give each other permission to think about it differently. Because if we don't, then we stay right where we are, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, they're like, my brain is spinning because that's what happens. I have these conversations, then my brain's like, okay, how do we go off and solve this? How do we make it happen? Erin, tell me, how do we make this happen? Give our listeners something they can do today or this week to start us somehow in the right journey, to let them be a part of designing this future vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Great question. I'm thinking about three things, because not to overshoot or anything, but
you're good. There's choices then.
Gosh, if I'm in that position, what are some reframing moments today, like you're saying, that can change things holistically over time? But yeah, I think the first one is that kind of thinking about all of us as members of a community, whether you have children or not, a learning community. I think a lot of people that don't have kids sort of dismiss, public schooling or the charter schools that are in their neighborhood, or independent schools, even religious-based schools. But how could you be part of that? I would say, as a call to action, how can you be part of their lives, their communities, their learning? Because we will all be part of their ongoing growth, and we will be part of what they're creating when they're adults. So, looking back, I would say, and just thinking about, how can you be part of what's going on for people younger than yourself. I think the second one is thinking about success for your own children, if you have children, differently, as we're saying, being open to potential stories of learner-owned success or child-owned success in the world. And humbly, my son teaches me something every day about changing how I think about this stuff, and recalibrating my own, desires or interests for him, but also for everybody, just learning from him and his, the way he sees the world as a digital native, as really an AI native, I feel like at this point. And so he and his peers and people younger than him have very different expectations around what success looks like. And so really following the lead of people and listening to how we can support them from the bottom up versus the top down, I would say. So just kind of rethinking that. And then lastly, requiring your place of work to value your own and your colleagues' learning journeys, asking your employer, beyond professional development or continuing education, how can I be more honest about what I want and need when I'm in this role? And can we do things where we're sharing our own learnings together? Because, potentially people in your place of work have a lot to share and give as teachers and mentors that you might not even know about, And so
Right.
raising up those relationships inside, but also asking, if there's somebody you're interested in learning from, could they come in and do a webinar or a lunch and learn? So just kind of starting to ask those questions, if you're not already, around how can we continue to grow ourselves in our own learning while we're here? Because to your point earlier, Jessica, it makes for a much more joyful, enriching, flourishing work community if people are talking about this stuff in the midst of all the hard things, but talking about how can we be better people while we're here dealing with some things that are hard, and there's always going to be hard days, but how to find redemption in that through the lens of learning.
Awesome. I love, those are great calls to action. Those all seem very doable. I am going to spend some time doing those myself. Especially the second one, the helping support the kids from the bottom up. I had never considered how vastly different the world is for my second and third grader today
Mm-hmm.
than it was when I was in second and third grade. It is a completely different world. And so their expectations and needs for what success looks like in that world, I need them to tell me that, right? Like that's, I can't put what I think it is on them because it's different than what I ever experienced. So that one has my head spinning a little. I'm excited to spend some time with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Thank
Love it.
you. This has been delightful. I'm super excited. I'm going to marinate on a lot of this. I know our listeners will as well. Um, I am going to share in the podcast description for everyone the links to Erin's work, so links to Desklight, so you can learn more about that. And Erin, is there any last words you want to say before we jump off and conclude this time of time travel to a better future for us?
Oh, I love it. Thank you for the concept and the idea and the opportunity to talk about it. It's always a lot of fun. So thank you for having me, Jess.